The fluorescent lights of the downtown bus station flickered overhead as Marcus wiped down the security desk for the third time that night. 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday meant the usual crowd: exhausted second-shift workers, college students returning from late classes, and the occasional tourist who'd miscalculated their travel time. He'd worked this shift for 6 years, long enough to recognize the regulars and spot trouble before it started. But nothing in those 6 years prepared him for the moment he'd look up and see a pair of eyes that would change everything, eyes that held a terror so raw, so desperate, that his heart forgot how to beat for just a second. She walked in with the 11:40 crowd, clutching a worn duffel bag against her chest like a shield. Marcus noticed her immediately, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because of how hard she was trying to blend in. Her shoulders curved inward, her gaze fixed on the floor tiles, counting each step as if the pattern might save her life. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the humid September heat, and her dark hair fell forward, curtaining her face from view. Marcus had daughters. 2 of them, both in college now, both taught from the time they could walk to be strong, to ask for help when they needed it, to trust their instincts. This woman, she couldn't have been more than 25, moved like someone whose instincts were screaming, but whose voice had been stolen. She took a seat in the far corner, away from the clusters of waiting passengers, positioned so her back was against the wall and she could see both entrances. Smart, Marcus thought. Someone had taught her to be watchful, or life had taught her the hard way. Every few minutes, her head would snap toward the main entrance, her body tensing like a deer catching the scent of a wolf. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Marcus tried to focus on his logbook, on the security monitors, on anything but the knot forming in his stomach. "Mind your business," a voice in his head whispered. "She hasn't asked for help. Maybe she's fine. Maybe you're reading this all wrong." But then a man walked through the main entrance, and Marcus saw her entire body go rigid. He was tall, well-dressed in a way that spoke of money and confidence, wearing a polo shirt and expensive watch that caught the fluorescent light. His eyes scanned the station methodically, predator-like, moving from face to face. When his gaze found the young woman in the corner, something shifted in his expression, satisfaction mixed with possession. She saw him. Marcus watched the color drain from her face, watched her grip tighten on the duffel bag until her knuckles went white. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just shrank smaller, as if she could disappear into the plastic chair itself. The man started walking toward her, his stride purposeful, unhurried. He had all the time in the world, and he knew it. Marcus's hand moved to his radio, then stopped. Called in what? A man walking toward someone in a public space. His supervisor's voice echoed in his memory from countless training sessions: "We're not here to make assumptions. We're here to maintain order." But every instinct Marcus had, every protective impulse that had driven him to this job after leaving the army, was screaming at him to move. So he did. He grabbed his clipboard and walked straight toward the corner, intercepting the man's path with practiced casualness. "Evening, sir," Marcus said, his voice carrying the particular blend of politeness and authority he'd perfected over the years. "I'm conducting a routine check of passenger tickets tonight. Can I see your ticket and ID, please?" The man stopped, irritation flashing across his features. "I haven't purchased a ticket yet." "Then I'll need to see your ID while you're in the waiting area." Security protocol. Marcus kept his expression neutral, professional, but he positioned his body between the man and the woman. It wasn't subtle. The man's jaw tightened. "That's not standard procedure. I've been through this station dozens of times." "New policy as of last week," Marcus lied smoothly. "We've had some issues with loitering. I'm sure you understand." For a moment, they stood there, 2 men engaged in a silent battle of wills. Marcus was acutely aware of his radio, of the panic button on his belt, of the young woman behind him who still hadn't made a sound. The man's eyes drifted past Marcus's shoulder, locking onto his target again, and Marcus saw something ugly surface in that gaze: anger, entitlement, barely controlled violence. "I'm actually just here to pick up my girlfriend," the man said, his tone shifting to something meant to sound reasonable. "She's right there. We had an argument earlier, but we've talked it out. Haven't we, sweetheart?" Marcus didn't turn around, didn't take his eyes off the man for a second. But he heard it, the smallest, most broken sound he'd ever heard. Not agreement. Not words. Just a whimper of pure fear that made his blood run cold. Sir, Marcus said, and all pretense of casual politeness evaporated from his voice, I'm going to need you to wait by the ticket counter while I verify your information. This is ridiculous. You can't. I can, and I am. Marcus straightened to his full height, 6'3" of muscle memory and protective fury. You can wait by the counter, or I can call the police right now and we can sort this out with them. Your choice. You've got 5 seconds to decide. Something changed in the man's calculation. Maybe he saw the determination in Marcus's face. Maybe he realized a public scene wouldn't serve his purposes. Maybe he was smart enough to know when he'd lost this particular battle. His expression smoothed into something cold and controlled. You know what? I don't need this hassle. He pulled out his phone, made a show of checking it. I'll wait outside. Tell her I'm waiting by the car when she's done with whatever this is. He turned and walked away, but not before shooting Marcus a look that promised this wasn't over. Marcus watched him exit through the main entrance, watched him take up a position just outside the glass doors, phone to his ear, eyes still fixed on the interior. Only then did Marcus turn around. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. Up close, he could see the fading bruise on her cheekbone, carefully covered with makeup. He could see the way she held her left arm close to her body, protecting old injuries. Miss, Marcus said softly, crouching down so he wasn't looming over her, you don't have to tell me anything. But I need you to know that you're safe right now, in this moment. Do you have somewhere to go? Someone I can call? She shook her head, the movement jerky, panicked. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, rough from disuse or screaming or both. I left. I finally left. I got my papers, my documents, everything I need. But I didn't think he'd find me so fast. He always finds me. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Not tonight, he doesn't. He pulled his radio off his belt and called for his supervisor, keeping his eyes on the woman. Stay right here. I'm going to help you. The next hour moved like a dream painted in harsh fluorescent light. Marcus's supervisor, a woman named Carol who'd raised 3 kids on her own, took one look at the situation and knew exactly what was happening. They called the police, who called a crisis counselor, who called a domestic violence shelter. With an opening. Through it all, the man remained outside, a shadow behind the glass, waiting. But he couldn't touch her. Not with Marcus standing guard. Not with Carol making calls and filling out reports with fierce efficiency. Not with the 2 police officers who arrived and had a very pointed conversation with him about harassment and restraining orders. When the shelter van finally arrived, unmarked, inconspicuous, Marcus walked her to it personally. She paused at the door, turned to look at him with those same terrified eyes, but something new had crept into them. Hope, maybe. Or just the first breath of freedom after drowning for so long. Why? She asked. I didn't ask for help. I didn't say anything. Marcus thought about his daughters. He thought about every person who'd ever needed help but couldn't ask for it. He thought about the kind of world he wanted to live in, versus the kind of world that existed when good people turned away. You didn't have to ask, he said simply. Your eyes said everything. She nodded, understanding something that didn't need words. Then she climbed into the van, and it drove away into the night, taking her toward safety, toward healing, toward a life where she wouldn't have to be afraid of every entrance and exit. Marcus went back to his desk, to his logbook and security monitors and the ordinary rhythm of a Thursday night shift. But something had changed. He'd changed it. One moment, one choice, one refusal to look away. The man outside eventually left, swallowed by the darkness beyond the station lights. But Marcus stayed, and would stay, watching for the fear in people's eyes, ready to be the shield they didn't know they needed. Because sometimes help doesn't wait to be asked for. Sometimes it just shows up, in the form of a security guard who remembered that beneath every uniform, every job title, every routine shift, there beats a human heart capable of choosing kindness over convenience, courage over comfort, action over apathy. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything.